Hi, I'm Greg Dell with Dell Disability Lawyers here with attorney Alexander Palomara. And we're going to talk about how the disability insurance companies look at your occupation. And Alex, really why it's so important to have a long-term disability attorney that understands not only the claimant's occupation, but how each and every disability insurance company is going to look at the occupation in conjunction with the policy language.
Well, I mean, the key to proving a claim is proving the definition of disability. And the definition of disability typically says you have to be unable to perform the duties of your occupation. So it's kind of like the second half of the definition of disability. You have to understand what the occupation is in order to prove that somebody is unable to perform those duties. So it's such an important thing to understand what the occupation is.
And I wanted to make a big distinction up front because there's a lot of attorneys. There's a lot of Social Security lawyers. We don't do Social Security work. And we don't do Social Security work because it's a high volume practice. There's very specialized in that area because there's only one type of definition of disability. And it was great that you started this video talking about, well, it's your own occupation. Whereas Social Security, I believe, is unable to perform any occupation for which you have education, training, or experience. And then there's all kinds of criteria where you could just have a particular condition and you automatically get approved. I mean, it's a government standard. It's like the tax code. It's completely messed up and a whole other specialty. But long-term disability against insurance companies is highly specialized and highly specific. And with every disability company that we encounter, and even within each company, and there's 40 different companies, every company then writes 5 or 6 or 10 different versions of a particular long-term disability policy. And with that, you really have to understand the definition of occupation, and then from there, how to present that occupation. Now, you talked about at first it's unable to perform substantial material duties of your occupation, and that's usually the first 12 to 24 months of a policy, and then it changes. But more often than not with our clients, that they don't just stay on disability for the own occupation period, they transition into the any gainful occupation. So when we're establishing a claim or doing an appeal, we're not just thinking about their own occupation, we're thinking about how that's going to relate to the any occupation definition after that.
Which people have to remember that the any occupation definition of disability also takes into account your past occupation, because in a sense they have to take into account your training, education, and experience. So when you see a policy, it'll define own occupation, what it means, and it'll define what any occupation means. Any occupation will say, taking into account your training, education, and experience. So the insurance company just can't ignore what your own occupation was, even though you get to the any occupation stage. So it's very important, as you're harping back to know what your own occupation is and how do you define it to the insurance company.
Okay. Now the whole fallacy or misleading tactic used by almost every disability insurance company, even within the own occupation definition stage, which is that first 12 to 24 months, is that these disability companies, more often than not, ignore the actual duties of a person's occupation. And can you explain to people, how do most disability companies look at someone's occupation regardless of what it is?
So that what they want to do is dumb it down, as dumb as they can possibly make it. And they want to box you into kind of 3 or 4 categories. And the way they define these occupations for the most part is it sedentary, where you're sitting all day? Is it light duty, where you're sitting part of the day and up part of the day, maybe having some light lifting, standards like carrying something 20 pounds or not? Is it, or is it heavy duty, where you have to you're doing construction work, you have to carry 50-pound, boxes or 50-pound tools around all day? And they want to get you into these categories, and if your job is sedentary, they say, hey, you can sit all day, your back issue is not that bad, you can sit all day, you should be able to work, get back to work, and they deny your claim. But when they're putting you in these 3 or 4 different categories, they're ignoring a few things. Like most occupations have a cognitive ability. If you're doing a sedentary job, you don't just get to sit all day and earn a paycheck for sitting in front of a computer all day. You actually have to use your brain and think about things and make decisions, or update things in your computer, whatever it is. It's just not sitting all day. So they try to box people in saying, hey, your job's sedentary, you can sit all day and get back to work. But maybe the person's suffering from pain or cognitive issues that don't allow them to use their, to think clearly as they're working throughout the day. So you have to be careful that with the insurance companies, they don't box you into these 3 or 4 different little categories of your sedentary job or light ability to work and whatnot. And you have to further expand upon the requirements of your occupation, because they really dumb it down and they overlook so many intricacies of people's occupations.
Where do they get these categories, this sedentary, light, medium, heavy duty classification? Where does that come from?
Social Security has that as well, and the Dictionary of Occupational Titles also qualifies different occupations under those standards as well. So that's where they get those definitions of what it means to be a sedentary job, a light job, or a heavy job and whatnot.
So what's so sad about these classifications is that, and it's good if we take an example of say a manager. And a manager in some type of business who's supervising employees, but not a manager where they have to lift anything. So let's just agree it's a sedentary type occupation where it's more often than not they're sitting, maybe they have to do some standing, some walking, but it falls into that sedentary category. The disability company will basically have that person's claim reviewed and ask the doctor what are the restrictions and limitations. Now, how often do you see the disability company even tells the medical reviewer or the doctor or whoever's reviewing the file what the occupation is of that person?
How often do I see that?
Yeah.
Not very often. They don't really expand upon what the requirements of the job is at all half the time, or not even half the time, the great majority of the time.
Right, so that's a huge problem because now you're asking the person who's reviewing the records, don't even consider what the person does. Just tell me if they have restrictions and limitations, and then they'll be like, yeah, well, maybe they should be able to have a break, once every 2 hours, or they can sit for 8 hours a day. They could walk as much as they need. They shouldn't lift more than 20 pounds. So the game the disability companies play is they get this back and they go, doctor said you could sit for 8 hours a day, you could walk for 12, and you can stand whenever you want, and just don't lift more than 10. And we think those are your restrictions. And like you said earlier, but that has absolutely nothing to do with the job, because compare that to, for a manager, what does the job posting look like, or the job description of that job? That job description probably says nothing about, you must have the ability to sit for 6 hours a day, you must be able to stand for 7 hours a day, you must be able to walk. It says nothing like that. It talks about you must have this education experience, you must be able to manage people, you must be able to think quickly, you must be able to multitask, you must be able to work well with others. All of the cognitive skills that are required to do the job, besides the years of experience that you need, work experience, be available, show up for appointments, work 40 plus hours a week. Nothing about just sit, stand, or walk. And yet, like you said, non-sophisticated terms, they dumb it down and make it like it's nothing more than just sitting, standing, or walking. Yet it's far more than that. So as an attorney, though, how important is it that you understand all of the different occupations, and how do you present evidence as to what the duties are of each and every job for the people that you represent?
Well, there's a few things that we can do. I mean, it's ultimately so important because, again, the definition of disability requires that you prove that you're unable to perform the duties of your own occupation. So it's one of the biggest things is proving what the occupation is. So there's a few sources of information of how to prove what your occupation is. One, you get it from the job description from the employer. Reach out to the employer, get a copy of the job description. Two, oftentimes I have my clients write out a page or two of what their duties were at their occupation. Now, it's kind of unique in the sense that the policies specifically state that occupation, it's how it's performed in the national economy, not how it's performed at the specific, employer's location and whatnot. But I still get my clients to write out what the requirements of their job were, because again, what the insurance companies do, they take the definition of manager, and there's hundreds of thousands of different types of managers out there. So they find one in the Dictionary of Occupational Titles that says, hey, this manager was required to do this, and they say this is what your job was. And I want my client to expand upon what his requirements were, because I said, no, you guys are wrong. It's not that type of manager, it's this type of manager.
Right.
And the requirements of this type of manager requires this level of cognitive abilities and carrying abilities and whatever it may be.
Right, the manager of a warehouse is not doing what the manager of Outback Steakhouse is doing.
100%,
It's
exactly.
completely different.
So then another source of information regarding the requirements of our clients' occupations, if we find specialists, we find occupational, what's the word I'm looking for? Vocational consultants
Yeah.
who help define the requirements of our own occupation, which is great because it's another level of proof to either prove to the insurance company or disprove what the insurance company believes are the requirements of our clients' occupations.
When you take all of this occupational information, and you touched on the national economy, that is another issue where they go, this is how the job is done in the national economy. And the disability insurance companies will commonly use a vocational consultant who just goes and grabs the definition of manager and says, this is what it is. And it's high volume for a lot of these insurance companies. They don't dig any deeper than that. They just look and say what it is. The other thing that's a little weird is the job descriptions. 99% of people's jobs, they'll look at a job description and go, yeah, that's what they told me, but here's the reality of what I really do. Yes, that's my job title, but I do 50 other things. So often a job description is just one little piece of the puzzle and not really the full story, and that has to be articulated to the disability insurance company as well.
But you brought up a good point, because the insurance companies have vocational consultants on staff. And when you read those reports, they're kind of sad in a sense. They really, you can tell they throw it together in 2 seconds, and they don't even apply to the client's abilities or inabilities and whatnot. They basically just take whatever doctor the insurance company hired to justify your denial. They take the opinion of that doctor and solely that doctor and apply it to the Dictionary of Occupational Titles. So the vocational consultants that work for the insurance company are really doing, or it's kind of sad what they do. They're not doing a moral job there. They're really
Right.
not. So, but the ones that we hire tend to be pretty independent. They don't just do what we tell them to do. They do a true analysis of our client's occupation, and it kind of gives us more credibility when we file our appeals, or we have to go to court and say, Judge, look at this consultant's report compared to their consultant's report, which is like a 2-page document saying nothing,
Right.
So it's very, again, just to harp on the fact that it's very important in certain cases that we do hire our own vocational consultant.
So, this is just one piece of the claim in terms of proving the occupation, which is part of the definition of disability. But one of the things we've done to offer to people is we've created all these different videos on our website where we talk about how your specific occupation is going to be looked at. Now, there's thousands of occupations out there, but we've got a lot of information on the top occupation, so you can search our website by your specific occupation. What we've tried to do is link up all of the cases that we've handled specific to that particular occupation, provided tips specific to your occupation, followed cases that have been resolved around the country, even if we didn't handle them, to see how courts interpret your occupation, because there's 3 parts of this puzzle. You got to understand your definition of disability, you got to know your occupation, and you got to know the medical condition. And you got to put all 3 of those things together. So we highlight all of those things, and we hope that you really find the information on our website helpful for that. The other thing is we're continuing to specifically answer questions and do more videos specific to occupation if you have any of those, and we encourage you to reach out to us. And of course, people can subscribe to our YouTube channel because we're always putting out more and more information. If you have topics that you want us to discuss, we're happy to do that as well. But most importantly, call Alex, call myself, call any of our lawyers. No matter where you live in the country, we'll provide you with an immediate free review of your long-term disability claim, and we'll let you know immediately whether or not we can assist you.